If I don't get immunity, then crooked Joe Biden doesn't get immunity. And all of the things he's done to allow the border invasion, millions and millions of people coming into our country, many from prisons, jails, mental institutions, insane asylums, many terrorists coming into our country. That's really allowing insurrection.
So yes, Donald Trump is threatening to lock up President Joe Biden, literally as his lawyers are making the case for why he deserves immunity for his crimes related to trying to overthrow the government following the 2020 election. Right now, in front of an appeals court, his lawyers are having this argument, and it doesn't appear to be going well. We're gonna give you all the updates on that. But he's also saying, if it's denied to me, then it's denied to Crooked Joe, and I'm gonna lock him up. And he's obviously in a muddled state of mind because he started talking about how if there's migrants coming across the border, then that's insurrection, which that's now a section like 3 of the 14th Amendment argument. So he's getting like his trials mixed up with him being removed from the ballot. Look, he's got an addled mind and he's quite old. But anyway, you should know that his lawyers have apparently faced a very skeptical reception before this appeals court as they tried to argue that all of what he did in trying to overturn the results of the election is handled under this vague, untested concept of presidential immunity. The actual trial in this case will be in March, so stay tuned for that. But we have John Sauer, who argued that for presidents to be able to be charged in a criminal prosecution and to get past their immunity, they have to first be impeached and convicted by the Senate. And for more details on that, you can check his sources, which are, he came up with it, I guess. But anyway, I'm not convinced. Judge Florence Pan also didn't seem super convinced, asking, you're saying a president could sell pardons, could sell military secrets, could tell SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? And Sauer wants to earn his paycheck, so he was unflappable. He said he would have to be and would speedily be impeached and convicted before the criminal prosecution. And what he means by that is that magically this shield of immunity goes away if you're convicted by the Senate. But the interesting corollary to that is if he ordered SEAL Team 6, maybe on Twitter or on Rumble, to assassinate a political rival, and then you had enough people of his party in the Senate that they said, we're just not going to impeach and convict him, then you couldn't charge him with a crime. That is what Trump's legal team is saying. That he was put on the spot by this insane hypothetical of assassinated political rival, and he has to say that, yeah, you're immune unless they convict you. And obviously in this case, they did not. So, and they will never, the Republicans of the Senate will never allow it regardless of what he does. So they consider that to be like a perfect defense. But thus far, the judges don't seem to be that convinced. Jackson, I want your opinion on this. We'd been discussing before the show sort of what passes for a defense for Donald Trump. And it's basically never, here is why what I did is not a crime. It's always, I can't crime. It's cool if I crime. Would you please look the other way while I crime? What do you think?
Pretty much, it's literally that. It's either I'm immune, blank, point blank, period, or I didn't know any better, so give me a pass. Which, as we talked about, is a lot of the time a defense that people in high positions will have who maybe a week or a month before, these are the guys who you shouldn't question. They're the ones who knew everything. But Donald Trump really is in such an interesting position. One, he doesn't need to be dealing with any of these felonies in the first place, but he is nonetheless. But, Biden is not in that good of a position in terms of his polling, but that can change. Now, the problem that Donald Trump really has is he has no defense for any of this. What are these judges really going to do? Even Trump appointed judges. Like, do you really want to let this man just pass with immunity? Oh, yeah, Donald Trump's immune. Well, Republicans have been losing since 2018. So it's pretty fair to say that eventually a Democrat's going to be president again. It could be Biden in 2024. Do you want Biden to move forward with that type of with that type of precedent, since precedents are being talked about? It's just, for anybody who really wants Donald Trump to get back in office, he's making it really hard for that to happen because of what's going on in the courts. It's like, how can you win with this defense? You can't. And that's why he keeps losing. So if there was ever a man who was his own worst enemy, it's definitely Donald Trump. Perfect case study.
And he deserves it. You
Yeah.
alluded to his second defense. So we have this, I have presidential immunity for everything in anything I do. Like, so everybody needs to understand the DOJ has basically held that while you are president, you cannot be prosecuted for things that you do as part of your official duties. That is like a thing that the DOJ said. I know that like Washington loves to treat it as like, oh no, that's carved in granite on Mount Olympus. But it's not. It's a legal theory that they have that could and inevitably will at some point be tested by the Supreme Court, possibly here. But even if it was carved in marble on Mount Olympus, how does calling up Raffensperger in Georgia and saying, get me exactly the votes I need to win? How does that fit under this? Your official duty, because he comes out and says my official duties is to investigate voter fraud. What part of investigating voter fraud is I need 723 votes, go get him, buddy? That is like they are trying to stretch it so far. And it leads us into, because we don't know if the Supreme Court is going to adjudicate this, it leads even the prosecutors in this bizarre position where right now they're arguing that he was acting as a candidate, not a president, when he was doing these things, talking to Raffensperger, setting up the fake electors, encouraging his supporters to march on the Capitol. And like, it's my stance, and I assume many reasonable people in the audience would say, who the hell cares what he was acting as? Who cares what frame of mind he was in? Who cares what vibe he had at that point? He's doing things that are illegal, that resulted in horrible things happening. But this is what they have to do because they don't know when or if the Supreme Court is going to swoop in. As of right now, in this particular case, the Supreme Court left it to the Court of Appeals to determine presidential immunity in this particular case. And so the Supreme Court is choosing to weigh in certain areas and not others. They're saying we are going to decide on this removing him from the ballot thing for Colorado at the very least, but we're not going to weigh in on the immunity. But that doesn't mean that they can't later on. We're going to be launching into all these different cases, particularly at the beginning of March. And at any point coming out of that, things could happen that could lead to appeals from the Trump team. And then you could possibly trigger a Supreme Court response. And the bad thing about that is the farther into this year we get, the less time we have before the GOP primary is concluded, before the Dem primary, to the extent that the Democratic Party will allow one to continue, will be concluded. We might even be done with the election at that point. And then we get to test out his little threats about locking up his political opponents under a theory of presidential immunity that in his mind evaporates the second he becomes president. It will no longer apply to Joe Biden. So anyway, I don't know what you expect, Jackson, to happen timeline wise. Where do you see this going?
I think that it's about as good as it's going to get for Trump right now. I think it's going to get worse. Biden has a number of things that he needs to address, just like any president does, just like any incumbent would. But, at the end of the day, Donald Trump's not going to get away with 91 felonies. He's going to get convicted. Polling shows that when he does get convicted, that's going to damage his polling numbers. Democrats have been outperforming in the polls for years now. And, pretty much everything else that you look at doesn't really bode well for Donald Trump. So, I just don't see, again, when it comes to the legal system, how do you let this dude really skate with this? He hasn't been, and he's not going to all of a sudden. He's going to keep losing in court. And so it's like the bigger danger would be for the next Donald Trump or, the next guy or a person who would be more competent than him. Because even if Trump were to win in 2024, his spiraling demise can't be stopped at this point. Like, he's such a chaotic disaster that he's been rejected by the world, and that's not going to stop, even if he were to win. So I wouldn't want to trade places with him. I know that. But unfortunately, Biden he's too close, and his administration is really going to have to put in some work.
Well, they're promising that they're going to campaign harder, and we'll be getting to Biden on the other side of the break. I would also say you talked there about worrying about like a future Trump or something. I know Trump does hold this unique position where he can say things that other Republicans, even in the last few years, get in trouble for and stuff like that. But the thing is, like, there are lots of these MAGA people who have a variety of different personality characteristics and political values and everything that leads them to love Trump. Right now, we have these young white male conservatives who are spending every second of the day online and are getting really mad about everything. And they love, like much more openly than MAGA people will, talking about how Nazis are awesome and everything. They're much more radicalized. Now, I don't know how many of them there are. I don't know that when they get to be 30, 40 and all that, if they can take over a whole political party, but they are going to at least be a part of that party. And they are going to be pushing for candidates that are going to make Donald Trump seem like a blushing bride in terms of his willingness to say and do utterly insane, violent things. So you already see the dabbling of that with people like Ramaswamy, who are much more openly talking about conspiracy theories on the debate stage. But stay tuned for that over the next few decades.